Okay, my name is Connor Wenderlich,
Hey, and I'm Noah Flaum.
and we did our presentation on outsourcing. So, what is outsourcing? Outsourcing is the process of a company hiring a firm to provide employees to fill jobs that could be performed in-house. So, it's typically done in order to cut costs by having another company pay these outsourced employees less than what it would cost the initial company to employ them.
So it
So,
would
how does it
really
work?
be sort of like I would outsource to save money.
Correct. Yeah.
And now, could I outsource because somebody may have a technology that I don't have?
Yeah, we're gonna get to that. We cover
Yeah.
Okay.
that.
So how does it work? There's a company called Cognizant, which is the company that Google uses to outsource a lot of their IT jobs. Uh, they're just the company Cognizant has a lot of well-trained employees who are knowledgeable about IT, so it's cheaper and easier for Google to hire them. Uh, so another advantage could be from just different labor laws in other countries. They are allowed to pay companies less. So but outsourcing does have an effect on the way employees behave and the culture of a workforce. Uh, Sometimes outsourced employees feel as though the company is not as committed to them uh, and that they make less money, they don't get as many hours, and it can ultimately just lead to them feeling insignificant because there have been studies that have shown that outsourced employees uh, aren't uh, given equal opportunity for training, promotions, just bettering themselves within the company.
Are they more efficient or
Oh
than
yeah,
the?
so I have a list of advantages and disadvantages, and one of them is improved efficiency. But I'm gonna cover that right now.
Okay.
So
Okay. Go ahead.
outsourcing is pretty interesting because you're essentially bringing in, an employee from somewhere else to work for your company, and that can bring a lot of, special tools with it. One of them would be improved efficiency. So companies can specialize in the things that you need. So like, let's say you need metal parts built. They can make it for you. They can send it to you, and you can have a contract with them. You have access to the knowledge that's all around the world. Not just where you are, your own country. You can have people working for you who are specialized in your line of work. Let's say you make clothing. There's clothing manufacturers in different countries that use fabrics that we don't even have available to us. So if
Hmm.
they make the clothes there and ship it over, then now you have access to clothing from around the world. Another thing that they can do is can produce it in a shorter period of time. So like, let's say you're a small retail store and you need toys or you need electronics. You obviously can't build that yourself, but what you can do is you can hire a supplier maybe in a different country that's cheaper than it would be to, get it from somewhere close. And you can just have them bring it in for you. So that's pretty convenient. So another advantage of outsourcing is you can have a higher ROI, which means return on investment. So subcontracting reduces costs. Obviously, cheaper labor in domestic countries, they, generally speaking, receive lower rates. So that can be a pretty convenient thing for your company if you're trying to cut costs. You're also able to tap into domestic talent elsewhere. So, we only see on a day-to-day basis what's in front of us, but actually there's an entire world around us with, untapped potential and new ideas that we haven't
Hmm.
ever considered. So traveling around the world, you may find, oh, wow, this country could use this. I'm going to develop a company for that, and I'm going to outsource a job there. And like I said before, cheaper labor. So another
Hmm.
advantage of outsourcing. Go ahead. You can ask a question.
No, go ahead. I'm good.
Another advantage of outsourcing is control of employment. So if the company doesn't perform well, you can just drop the contract and find a new one. So like,
Hmm.
if you don't like the people you're working with, there's not a very long-term commitment, obviously, unless you sign like a patent contract or whatever. So you
Hmm.
have a lot of flexibility with who you're working with, and you have a large choice in companies to work with, just on a global basis. So there's also some disadvantages of outsourcing, obviously. This comes with distance, so less control over business processes. So let's say you have a company that operates in Saudi Arabia. It's going to be a lot harder to monitor their day-to-day processes and make sure that everything's up to standards. There might be a 12-hour time difference between where you are and where they are, so it's harder to communicate. No, this isn't like the hugest deal, but there's no way to know the job is done right until you see the deliverables that they send you. So that could be a disaster if you need a
But
day.
then you just drop the contract and then you drop the contract and move on to somebody else, right?
Right, but I mean that's a short-term disadvantage. Obviously, you're right.
Yeah.
You definitely can drop the contract, but it is it's still a
Sure.
risk. So there's concerns on privacy and intellectual property. I actually learned about this in business law. So in some other countries, they don't have the same protection and rights that we do. So like if you work with another place where their intellectual property laws are different, you may end up risking like your own knowledge and not being able to protect it. Another concern about privacy is that customer concerns that a product is produced by someone else. So like, if they see on your label produced by this and it's like a different company, they might be a little concerned that it's not. Why are you not producing your own products? Like, well, are you not good enough? Is this company better than you? Is there something wrong with your production process? So it can raise some customer questions. That's not a huge deal though. And another disadvantage of outsourcing is obviously job security. Domestic jobs are much less secure, obviously because of the distance. If something goes wrong with your company, the first people to get cut are probably going to be the outsourced people if they're not serving their purpose. So this also leads to a higher unemployment rate, just generally speaking, in third world countries.
Okay.
Oh, is this me, Connor? Sorry. So
Yeah, no, this one's you.
Yep, cool. Okay, so Google and outsourcing. So in order to combat these negative effects, Google has taken corrective measures. Google had protests from employees about sexual harassment policies and pay equity. Google began
Relative to the outsourced employees
I'm sorry, I didn't hear
or
your
their
question.
own employees?
I didn't hear your question. I'm sorry.
Okay. If we're looking at Google outsources, right?
Right.
And they've seen some negative effects from that.
Yeah.
Are these protests for employees or outsourced people relative to sexual harassment policies and pay equity?
So they've had protests from their outsourced employees about sexual
Okay,
harassment.
that's what I was clarifying. Okay, outside
Yeah.
people.
Yep. And their pay equity. So the workers, they feel like, oh, I still work for your company. I should at least, deserve a fair wage. But obviously, if they work in a different country, their minimum wage is different, and Google can actually get away with paying them less.
Okay.
Google began requiring vendors that to pay their employees 15-hour minimum wage and give their employees more sick days and paid leave. This is, just general like a good thing to do. Like, if you want your workers to work well, which actually we talked about, we learned in our quiz yesterday as like one of the philosophies was like participative versus the other one. If your employees take pride in their work, you won't need to monitor them. Like giving them these basic things is like, you should do that so that they'll want to do the work. And if they want to do the work, they'll do it better. So it's important for Google to take these measures because Google's parent company, Alphabet Inc., has more outsourced employees than full-time. So, in this specific case, having a lot of outsourced employees means that they have to adjust their basis. They're not working with a lot of in-house employees, so they have to take different measures to make sure that everything runs efficiently.
And then we talked about just how outsourcing is going to affect us in our future. And I mean, as outsourcing becomes a more cost-effective way to hire employees, it'll certainly affect job availability for all of us graduating college. And it'll also become harder to find work that's just full-time and with the pay we want. because just being employed by a firm is usually better and has more favorable pay and benefits than being an outside contractor. So,
Do you think it might
yeah.
give you more flexibility? Let's come in from your perspective. Would you guys consider working for an outsourcing firm, being one of the outsourced employees?
I would, depending on the firm. I think that's
Okay.
very case dependent. So, like, if it was a job in customer service, or something where you're like, it's all technology based, I think it's very reasonable. But I definitely wouldn't want to do that for like a production company, or like something where you should be there tangibly.
Okay.
And I think
Ben?
outsourcing, it isn't something that, I don't think being an outsourced employee is something that's terrible, that I would turn down a job just because I'd be working as an outsourced employee. I think it really depends on comparing, like, what are the opportunities that I have, and are there any better or worse opportunities? Like, so I think it's really just it's comparative to what else is on the table.
Do you
Yeah,
think
I
maybe
wouldn't.
go ahead.
I wouldn't necessarily, say, oh, this is an outsourced job and just like completely discount it. I would obviously take a lot of other factors into consideration.
Because the thing that if I'm really subject matter expert in something, a company could bring me in to do the work because they can't afford, they don't need a person full time to do this, but yet I'm very talented and could come in and, get something done in 5-10 hours that if they had to hire somebody would cost them way more. So maybe
Right.
they'd pay me more.
That's interesting. I think you should negotiate. You should obviously know what your skills and abilities are worth monetarily and also time wise. But I think even if it's just for the opportunity to work for a firm and have that on your resume for a short time, that might be a good thing.
Right.
Okay. Now, if you were a company, would you look to outsource stuff?
I definitely would. I think there's a lot of advantages to it that are underutilized, and one of them being the cheaper labor and new ideas.
How do you think this ties up with if we're looking at some of the other things we talked about? Is this something that we should look at from a social ESG, environmental, social governance issue? Is that something that goes against the grain of that?
I think this definitely can cross the line, and I feel like there's companies that do cross the line. Obviously, like you said, these employees are less important, therefore they can be exploited. I think that's definitely something to manage.
Okay. What did both of you guys learn from doing this project?
I was certainly surprised how much, like, just how valuable outsourcing can be and how much it's utilized. Like, I mean, I figured that, like, a lot of companies hire cheaper labor in other countries, but, like, the one big thing in the article that surprised me was that Google has more outsourced employees than employees that they employ themselves, which that
surprised me too.
Yeah. I guess I did.
Sorry, go ahead.
I guess I just didn't really have an understanding of how much outsourcing is utilized by companies, is really what I learned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I was surprised by the commonality of it, and the fact that it's very, it's actually overutilized these days. Companies are trying to cut back on how many, like, different branches they use that are not in-house.
Yeah, interesting. It leads us almost that there's sort of, we call it outsourcing in that, but another word that I've heard is gig work. Is you come in and you do a gig, you get paid, and you move on, and that it gives the employee a lot more freedom.
Right.
Could we say something like that? I mean, that the best case of gig work is Uber or Lyft.
Right. I think it's also like independent contracting.
Yeah.
You hire a contractor for your house to build the house, and then when the house is built, you move on, and then you hire an electrician, and the electrician does the So I think it can definitely be like that. Obviously, every company is different. Every company has different needs, and it's definitely cool. I learned a lot from this.
Good. Okay. Thank you.